What if the secret to building serious wealth isn't some complex financial wizardry, but actually simpler than learning to parallel park? Most people think building wealth is this impossible complicated thing that only rich people and financial geniuses can figure out. They picture Wall Street traders, inheritance money, lucky stock picks, or some magical formula that regular people like you and me just don't have access to. But here's the thing that nobody seems to talk about. Building wealth is actually way easier than you think. And I'm not saying this to sound like some motivational poster. I'm saying this because the math is genuinely simple. And once you understand how it actually works, you'll wonder why you were ever stressed about it in the first place. I spend way too much time thinking about money, compound interest, and why most people completely overcomplicate something that's actually pretty straightforward. If you want to understand the real mechanics of wealth building and stop believing that you need some special knowledge or insider access to get ahead financially, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you see money differently. The biggest lie we tell ourselves about wealth is that it requires some extraordinary effort or stroke of luck. Like you've got to be doing something special, something nobody else knows about, something complicated. But the reality is that the barrier between people who build wealth and people who don't isn't knowledge or luck or even income level. It's something much simpler. It's consistency. It's showing up and doing the boring stuff month after month after month while everyone else is looking for a shortcut. And here's what's interesting about that. Once you understand that wealth building is just a consistency game, everything changes. You stop looking for the magic bullet. You stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect investment. You just start doing the thing that works and you do it consistently until you wake up one day and realize you're actually wealthy. Let's talk about why people think wealth building is hard. Usually, it's because they're comparing themselves to billionaires or millionaires they see on social media without understanding the actual timeline involved. They see some entrepreneur who's worth 100 million and they think, how is that even possible? But they don't see the 20 years of grinding that came before the success. They don't see the failures and the pivots and the thousands of hours of work that nobody gave them credit for. So, they get discouraged and they think if they can't become a billionaire in 5 years, why bother trying at all? But that's like watching someone finish a marathon and saying, well, I can't run that fast right now, so I might as well not run at all. The distance seems impossible until you break it down into manageable chunks. Here's something that most people don't realize about building wealth. Your first dollar is actually the hardest one to make or save. It requires willpower. It requires saying no to things you want. It requires discipline when your entire life and culture is telling you to spend money now and worry about the future later. That first $1,000 is brutal. You have to track everything. You have to be intentional about every purchase. You have to resist temptation constantly. But here's what's wild. Once you've saved that first $000, the second 1,000 becomes noticeably easier. Not because your income changed or because you suddenly became more disciplined. It's because you've already proven to yourself that it's possible. You've built the habit. You've changed your identity from someone who spends whatever they earn to someone who saves money. And that identity shift is what makes everything that comes after it easier. The second thing that makes wealth building easier than people think is compound interest. And I know everyone talks about compound interest like it's some secret weapon. But most people still don't actually understand how powerful it is. They hear the term and they nod along, but they don't really grasp what it means in practical terms. Let me break it down. Compound interest is when your money earns returns and then those returns earn their own returns and then those returns earn their own returns. It's exponential growth instead of linear growth. And here's what's crazy about exponential growth. It seems slow at first, almost too slow to matter, but then something magical happens. It accelerates. It speeds up. And suddenly you're making more money from your investments than you're saving from your actual job. Think about this for a second. Let's say you start investing $500 a month. That's about $125 per week. For a lot of people, that's less than they spend on coffee and eating out. You put that money into a diversified index fund and it earns about 7% annually, which is actually pretty conservative based on historical stock market performance. In the first year, you're putting in $6,000 of your own money, but you're making about $300 in returns. That doesn't feel like much, but by year 10, you've put in $60,000 and your account balance is around $80,000 because compound interest has been quietly working in the background. And the beautiful part is that the longer you let it work, the faster it accelerates. By year 20, you've contributed $120,000, but your balance is around $230,000. Compound interest just added over $100,000 without you doing anything except being patient. This is why starting early is such a gamechanger, but it's also why starting late isn't as hopeless as people think. If you're 30 years old and you think, well, I missed my chance, you're actually just wrong. If you start investing $500 a month at 30 years old with 35 years until retirement, you're going to have over $1 million sitting in your account when you turn 65. $1 million. Not from some incredible investment genius or lucky stock picks, just from $500 a month in time and a 7% return. That's it. That's the whole secret. But the thing that makes wealth building even easier than the math suggests is that most people don't actually need to be rich to feel wealthy. There's a psychological component here that's really important. Once you hit a certain level of financial security, your quality of life doesn't really improve that much with more money. You still eat 3 meals a day. You still sleep 8 hours. You still spend time with people you care about. What changes is how much mental energy you're spending on financial stress. And that's where the real wealth is. It's not about having a $10 million net worth. It's about not having to do mental math every time you want to buy groceries. It's about being able to say yes to opportunities without calculating whether you can afford it. It's about sleeping at night without anxiety about money destroying your peace of mind. This is something that research on happiness and money keeps showing. There's a certain income level where more money does add to your happiness. That's around $75,000 to $100,000 depending on where you live. But beyond that, the correlation between money and happiness basically disappears. What matters is financial security. And financial security comes from not living paycheck to paycheck. It comes from having enough breathing room that unexpected expenses don't ruin your life. It comes from knowing that you could lose your job tomorrow and you'd be fine for months while you found something else. And here's what makes this easier than people think. You don't actually need that much money to feel secure. Once you have 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved, the psychological burden of financial stress drops dramatically. For a lot of people, that's between $15,000 and $30,000. That's not impossible. That's not even that much money. But it transforms your entire life. You stop feeling desperate. You stop taking jobs out of desperation. You stop staying in toxic situations because you have no other option. You start making choices from a place of strength instead of a place of fear. And when you make decisions from strength, you make better decisions. You negotiate better salaries. You invest in yourself with courses and certifications. You have the bandwidth to think about your future instead of just surviving today. The third reason wealth building is easier than people think is that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to optimize every single expense. You don't have to cut your coffee out completely or eat ramen noodles until you're old enough to retire. That's not sustainable. And frankly, it's not how successful savers actually do it. The people who build serious wealth aren't usually the ones making dramatic sacrifices. They're the ones who make small, consistent optimizations that compound over time. They might spend a little less on housing by being flexible about location. They might keep their car a few years longer than the average person. They might cook at home a bit more often. They might skip one vacation a year instead of taking two. These aren't extreme sacrifices. They're just slightly different choices than the average person is making. And when you make slightly different choices consistently for years and years, the gap between you and the average person becomes absolutely massive. This is where the math gets really encouraging for people who feel behind. The average American saves about 6% of their income after taxes. That's essentially nothing. If you can figure out how to save 10%, you're already ahead of most people. If you can save 15%, you're in the top 20% of savers. And getting from 6% to 15% doesn't require becoming a monk and renouncing all worldly possessions. It just requires being slightly more intentional about your spending than the average person. It requires saying no a little bit more often. It requires buying used instead of new occasionally. It requires making food at home instead of eating out every meal. These are not extreme changes. These are just normal behaviors that happen to align with building wealth instead of destroying it. The fourth thing that makes wealth building easier is that you don't need to pick winning stocks or find some amazing real estate deal or start a successful business. You don't need to do anything complicated or require special knowledge or luck. The most successful wealth builders in history are the ones who invested in boring diversified index funds and just left them alone. They bought funds that tracked the entire market. They didn't try to beat the market. They didn't spend hours researching companies. They didn't make emotional decisions based on news headlines. They just bought a simple portfolio of index funds, set up automatic contributions, and let compound interest do its thing for decades. That's it. That's genuinely the whole strategy that built the majority of millionaires in this country. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. It doesn't make for good stories at parties, but it works, and it works reliably, and it works for regular people with regular jobs and regular incomes. Compare that to someone trying to pick individual stocks. They're reading financial news constantly, agonizing over decisions, trying to time the market, paying higher fees, and making emotional decisions based on fear and greed. Statistically, they're underperforming the boring index fund investor by a significant margin. The boring strategy is the winning strategy because it's sustainable, reliable, and actually works. Here's something else that makes building wealth easier than people realize. Once you understand the basic principles, they don't change. The math doesn't change. Compound interest doesn't change. The power of consistency doesn't change. You can just do the basic thing and keep doing it. Invest in low-cost index funds. Contribute consistently. Don't panic sell during downturns and let the years pass. That's the whole strategy. Markets change and fads come and go, but the fundamental principles of wealth building through consistent investing never change. This is actually liberating. You don't need to be a genius or stay on top of financial news constantly. You just need to understand a few basic principles and execute on them consistently. The barrier to building wealth isn't intelligence or income. It's just discipline and time. Two things available to literally anyone who wants them. The fifth reason wealth building is easier than people think is that you get better at it the more you do it. This is similar to what I mentioned about saving that first thousand being the hardest, but it applies to the entire process. The first few years of wealth building are mentally and emotionally difficult. You have to override all your impulses to spend money. You have to watch other people enjoy their lives while you're saving. You have to delay gratification constantly. It's hard. But as you continue doing it, you develop new habits. You develop a new identity. You stop seeing saving money as a sacrifice and start seeing it as something you just do. And once that switch flips, everything becomes easier. Your brain literally rewires itself. Saving money stops requiring willpower because it stops being a choice you're consciously making. It just becomes what you do. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't wake up in the morning and think, should I brush my teeth today? No, you just do it. So, same thing happens with saving and investing once you've been doing it consistently for a while. And this is huge because willpower is a finite resource. If you're constantly fighting yourself about money, you're burning through your willpower on one area of your life, which means you have less willpower for other things. But once saving becomes automatic, you free up that mental energy for literally everything else. Also, the longer you're saving and investing, the easier it becomes. All your monthly contributions stay the same, but your investment returns keep increasing because your portfolio is getting bigger. Eventually, your returns exceed your contributions. You're making more money from your investments than you're saving from your job. That's when wealth building shifts from feeling like work to feeling like free money appearing in your account. Your money is earning its own money. The sixth reason wealth building is easier is that you don't have to do it alone anymore. There are tools available now that didn't exist even 20 years ago. You can open a brokerage account with basically $0. You can invest in fractional shares so you don't need $1,000 to buy a stock. You can set up automatic contributions so you don't even have to think about it. You can get information about investing basically instantly. You can access the same index funds that rich people use. You can read books and watch videos about personal finance whenever you want. The infrastructure for wealth building has become incredibly accessible. The barrier to entry is basically zero. You can start with $50 if you want. You can learn everything you need to know for free. You can automate the entire process, so it requires almost no ongoing effort. This is fundamentally different from 30 years ago when building wealth was genuinely complicated. Now, you can pick one or two index funds and be done thinking about it. Pick a diversified fund that matches your age and risk tolerance. Set up automatic contributions and don't think about it for decades. Check in once a year if you want. Because you don't have to do anything complicated. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to be willing to start. The seventh thing that makes wealth building easier than people think is that the compounding timeline is actually shorter than most people realize. Like if you ask someone how long it takes to build $1 million, they usually say something like 40 or 50 years. And technically, depending on your contribution rate and returns, that could be accurate. But it's misleading because people don't understand how the timeline actually works. Your first 100,000 takes the longest. Like genuinely, your first 100,000 might take 10 or 12 years if you're saving consistently, but your second 100,000 might only take 4 or 5 years. Your third 100,000 might take 3 years. Your fourth might take 2. By the time you're working on your 7th or 8th 100,000, you could be adding a 100,000 to your net worth every single year just from investment returns without saving anything extra. This is the power of compounding that most people miss. The timeline accelerates. It doesn't feel like linear progress. Like it feels slow at first, almost impossibly slow, and then suddenly, it starts moving fast. And here's the crazy part. This acceleration is a mathematical certainty. As long as you keep investing in something that earns reasonable returns, this will happen. There's no skill required. There's no special knowledge. There's no luck. It's just math. And math works the same way for everyone. The final reason wealth building is easier than people think is that you don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to time the market perfectly, find the best investment, or have the highest savings rate. You just have to be decent at the basics and stick with it. Perfection is impossible, but good enough is achievable and actually works. A slightly suboptimal strategy you stick with for 40 years will beat a perfect strategy you abandon after 3 years when the market crashes. Consistency beats perfection every time. This is liberating. You don't have to stress about finding the perfect investment or feel bad about missing hot stocks. You don't have to panic when the market drops. You just keep doing what you're doing because the basic stuff will work. It will work for you. Like it's worked for millions of other people. That's the real secret to wealth building. It's not complicated strategy or special knowledge. It's just doing the boring, simple, proven thing consistently for a long time. You don't need special knowledge. You don't need a lot of money. You just need to start. And starting is literally the easiest part. You open a brokerage account, which takes about 10 minutes. You set up automatic contributions, which takes about 5 minutes, and then you're done. You've started the process that will make you wealthy. The rest is just showing up every month and not panicking when the market drops. This is what people don't understand about building wealth. It's not dramatic. It's not exciting. It's not something that makes for good stories. It's just showing up and doing the boring thing month after month. And boring is exactly what you want. Exciting financial decisions are usually terrible financial decisions. Boring, consistent, simple decisions are what actually work. That's why most wealthy people are boring. They're not doing anything exciting or clever or special. They're just doing the basics consistently for a long time. And if you can do that, you can build wealth, too. It's genuinely that simple. Start saving. Start investing. Be consistent. Don't panic. Let time do the work. That's the whole secret. That's why building wealth is easier than you think.